We can all no doubt summon to mind the examples in all esports games of those people who just always used to get close. Maybe they'd come second, always top four seemingly in their prime, but somehow they wouldn't win. Or if they won, it was less likely that they won. More oftentimes, they'd be the ones having the silver medal, having to look over the other side of the stage, seeing some other guy with the best moment of his career, the culmination of all his practice, his hard work, his great games, and they were the ones who were kind of denied that. And so, in a sense, yeah, that's failure, especially if you're good enough where you can keep getting to that position again and again, but you're not actually succeeding. So I want to talk generally about the topic of failure in an esports context and in a larger sense, because obviously this is something that pervades life. So I mean, if we're talking about esports, like some pretty quick examples for people is, well, if you want to do League of Legends, you can say CLG EU. This team only really won 2 tournaments, and one was a small one. They won one DreamHack Summer, but other than that, yeah, it was a semi-final of Worlds. They had a top 6 at IPL 5. They had second place famously in OGN, second place ECC Poland. So they had all these results where they were always in position to maybe be the champions, but only once did it ever really happen for them. Go into something like Brood War, you've got, well, there's a lot there, but one of the most famous ones to me is Stork, because this guy really is one of the greatest players ever. He could just get so many semi-finals, whole bunch of finals, and yet he only won one. Only one big title ever in terms of OSLs and MSLs. StarCraft 2, let's go with my boy Naniwa. All those seconds, all those top 4s, all those crazy runs where sometimes he'd finish top 8, but he'd have to beat like some crazy-ass Korean to even get to the top 8, but then it somehow it never got all the way. There was always an element of failure there. He always felt like, oh, I failed, like it's not good enough. Like even if this was a better result than all the rest of the foreigners at the tournament, it's like he knew, to him it was failure. In CS, well, CS 1.6, we have a classic example, this team MTW, and in 2010 when they had Trace was their best player, he was playing amazingly. They were an awesome team that matched up with every team in the world. They were, for me, the second or third best team, mostly the second best team, and they only won one tournament in the whole year, because every time they kept getting matched up, every single bracket except that one tournament, they got matched up with Na'Vi, and Na'Vi beat them every single time that it mattered, and they were unable to win big lands. In Dota 2, there's a great example, which is Cloud9. This is a team which had the pieces. They had even the style to get so far in all these tournaments, but the difference between Cloud9 in like an upper bracket final, in a semi-final of a single elim, and Cloud9 in a final was just night and day. Once they got to that final, yeah, sometimes they were playing amazing opponents who won, and we're going to think of the opponent as legendary teams, all-time great teams, and great finals as well. But we can also see there was an element of Cloud9's failure there. They just fell apart. They couldn't match up to the moment. The key players within the lineup would always have certain underperformances, or they'd make some weird champion picking. You're like, oh, what's going on here? Like something's rattled them. So when we talk about this concept of failure, yeah, we do have to put in the context of who were they playing, what was their era, etc. But when you're talking about these sorts of players who repeatedly are getting there, unfortunately it is failure. Like it looks great to an outsider. Like if you get top 4s or top 2s, you're getting all this money, you're having great games. Hey, maybe the person you lose to is an all-time great player. But if you're the player on the other side of it, the one who's always finishing second, always finishing top 4, then to you it's actually more a case of like, okay, it's not that, okay, I had 8 chances and yeah, I won 1 and oh, the others didn't go my way. To them, the ones who are the really ones who have the killer instinct and who know how important it is and practice and put everything into the game, they're just looking at that like, okay, one time I succeeded. I did what I set out to do. That's good. But that doesn't wipe out the 8 times, the 7-8 times that maybe I should have won. Maybe I prepared everything. Maybe I thought this is my chance. Like to them, they failed 8 times. Okay, yeah, they succeeded once, but they failed 8. That's like a crippling aspect. So when you talk about failure, it's not just failure in the sense of like, oh, you're a failure, like you did everything wrong, like you can't succeed. This is where the aspect of courage comes in, because I think it's actually a really bizarre quality that in esports and in life in general, we tend to just write narratives that are fit to storylines over reality. And so when we see the guy who's clutch, he's good under pressure, he always wins, he always finds a way to win, we always think that's courage. That's the guy who's courageous. And listen, maybe it is. Maybe we don't know his story. Maybe sometimes he wasn't the best player. Maybe he wasn't supposed to win that day. Maybe he didn't even have the right preparation. But maybe he did have the courage and he did have the mental fortitude. And maybe he had just the mindset that he was able to overcome these things. But sometimes those players are also the gods. They're the ones who just, it feels almost like they were bred to be the champion, you know. They just have everything goes right for them. Everything seems like it builds into this point where it just makes sense that they win. It's easy to assign to them the idea that they're the courageous ones, But sometimes the courageous guy is actually the guy who's coming second again and again. He still gets up. And there's a lot of people in history who can come second and then that just breaks them. And they never even get to that again. Then they're wistfully talking about, oh, remember the time I had that top 4 or I had second? Like, I wish I could get back there. The guys who can repeatedly get back there again and again, and they still don't win. To have the ability to just keep picking yourself up, to keep reforging yourself, to keep adapting and to keep saying, oh, that's not enough, I'm going to keep going until I can get to my goal there. That's obviously some absolutely courageous stuff. And so let's talk about that concept of courage there, because to me, courage is like the antidote to failure in this sense. You might still fail, you might still lose, but if you have this courageous attitude, then you can face, courage is going to be how you face the adversity. It's not whether you overcome it. Sometimes in life we can't overcome these things, but we can definitely take them head on, and we can attack them, and we can withstand them and endure them in a very specific way, which is best described as courageous. To me, the best way to describe courage in this sense is, it's not that the guy lacks emotion or he lacks fear and he just goes out there and this guy, he's facing like, it's the equivalent of being like the Spartans, and he's facing like the massive army of Persia. He's like, oh, they could all just kill us all, but who cares, I'm not afraid, like, yeah, it's whatever. No, that's like bravado, that's like swagger, that might even be stupidity, that might be naivety, hubris. These aren't good qualities, actually. I don't have that much respect for the guy who just doesn't know fear and doesn't know whatever that is. The guy I respect is the guy who looks at this massive task in front of him, this titanous challenge. He looks at this guy who's already, we can tell this guy's a godlike player and an amazing team, and of course these opponents are supposed to win, and he doesn't just go, you know what, I'll give it my best, but I'm probably not going to win. No, he's not like that. Instead, what he does is he goes, all I've got is myself. All I've got is this moment. I've prepared as good as I can. I'm going in with the right mindset. I'm going to play my game. I can see the win conditions. I'm going to try and do the things that give me a chance to win. And regardless of what happens, even if he's better than me, even if he plays better than me, even if he's outworked me, in this moment now, I'm just going to give it my all. And then afterwards, if I fail utterly. And I know that's failure, but I'm willing to put myself out there in that dangerous position where I can fail, because in that moment where I can fail utterly is the moment, and this is in life and esports, where you can succeed the most. If you do not play in that sense, you cannot win. The opportunities are not going to be there for very low risk chances to be rewarded massively in general in life and in esports itself. So to be able to put yourself out there, that's the courage. And especially when you know the odds are huge, when you know you're facing someone who's better, you know you're facing someone incredible. Hey, maybe you know you're facing one of those guys who doesn't seem to get rattled and he seems to be better under pressure, and you know that you've got a history of having problems with that, and that you get rattled when you lose a game, and if something goes wrong in this style here, you're going to be thinking you're going to be attacked by your own thoughts and emotions. To have the courage to still go forward with that, and to just go out there and just pick up your weapons, your shield, your sword, and just go, right, I'm going to take the battle regardless of what happens. There's actually a great quote I think summarizes this from Game of Thrones. So it was the first book, I think, and it's where Eddard Stark, this noble man, this great character actually, very interesting, also called Ned Stark, his son Bran, his young son, who's kind of like just coming into puberty, he's learning to be a man, says to him, can a man still be brave if he is afraid? And Eddard says, that is the only time a man can be brave. So think about it that way. If you are the guy who just doesn't feel, they can't touch me, I'm better than them, all the rest of it, then hey, first of all, maybe you're meant to win anyway. And secondly, what's the courage in that? Anyone can go forwards in that particular scenario. Anyone can go forwards if they think there's no danger and do what they want to do. It's when you know that there is, and you don't back down from it then, and you don't get totally thrown off your game, and you don't think, just give up, or whatever, I'll try my best. It's when you are able to see all of that and go, you know what, this is a really bad situation, it's fucked up, like I might lose, I might look stupid, this guy might be so good, he might make me look like a moron in this game as I'm not even good, this might be the worst moment of my career, maybe this is the first big fall I've been, I've built all this for my career, and maybe I'm going to fail here in front of everyone, and even though people will say, yeah, you did well, another day you've got him, it won't matter, like unless I get that trophy, it won't matter. To be able to go forwards then, that's the remarkable thing, because if you talk about failure, there's many ways it can happen. You can get outplayed. Now listen, sometimes that's a one-off. Sometimes literally that day was just the wrong day out of whatever, the whole week when you could have played the guy. When something about the game or the way the game turned as it was being played out, he just beat you this one time. It was just purely the little plays he made in the game, or one little decision that either it was a great, brilliant decision from him, shrewd, but just on the point, or maybe he saw something in that game that one day and it turned it and allowed him to come back and win the whole series. It's one thing if you get outplayed that way. That's actually the easiest to resolve, I think, because you can just think, okay, put myself in the position again. It'll be a different day, and I can win then. You can get outplayed in terms of if you just play one of the gods. If you play against Flash in 2010 in a final, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how you win. I'm amazed that anyone did. The level that these people can get to, if you play with Cypher and Quake Live, you probably are going to lose. You might even get humiliated. These guys can go to a level no one's ever gone to when they're in that form. So listen, I don't blame you if you lose in that sense, but to have the courage to go and face it and still find a way inside to think it's possible to win. It's possible to put yourself in a position where maybe he'll make the mistake and then you'll succeed from that way. You don't have to overcome the god by outplaying him in that sense. But yeah, you can get outplayed. That's the most obvious one. You can get outworked. Now, if you're facing people where, listen, maybe naturally you don't love the game that much. You don't love to practice so much. You're not one of these people who's super driven. You always have to come first. If you're facing one of those people who is, well, then yeah, you're going to be in it for a tough time. Because the great players, when they lose, they're not like, oh, right, I need some time off. Like, oh, I need to get my head together. Like, oh, what am I do? I want to play this game. The great players, I mean, they're almost sociopathic in their nature, because a lot of them, when they lose, that day they're going to go into the practice hall again. They're going to start practicing, and they're going to practice harder than ever, because the notion to them is that can never happen again. I'm going to be in that situation again. This time I'm going to succeed. I mean, that's courage in itself, but you can be outworked in that sense. And if you get outworked like that, I mean, at this point, we're starting to get a bit less sympathetic, because, I mean, if you're the guy who loses and he outworked you, and then maybe on top of it he outplayed you, I mean, he deserves to win at that point in time, doesn't he? I mean, I hate to use terms like deserved or should or whatever, but what more do you expect at that point in time? So you can get outplayed, you can get outworked, you can get outprepared. Now, this might sound strange. What does that mean, outprepared? Because there's a big difference between preparation and work, by the way. Work is like working on the fundamentals, working on your game in general versus everyone. Preparation, to me, is, yeah, there's a general aspect. Like if you're playing a tournament, you have to prepare for the whole field, etc. But we're talking about preparation in terms of a specific opponent here. If you're going against a certain opponent, there are legendary games where one opponent would have won, but another one came to some conclusion beforehand or during the game as a result of specific preparation, watching the enemy, thinking about themselves, come up with tactics that allowed them to be victorious in that scenario. Now, in this particular situation, this one really can go both ways in terms of failure and the courage to face it. Because on one hand, you look at it and you go, okay, sometimes you could be the better player, things would have gone your way, but that guy just, maybe that last demo we watched, or he got like a key piece of information seeing you in a semi-final, he figured something out about your style that was able to tip it, and now he could just win, or he had just the right approach to counter you, or to throw you off your game. Yeah, that can happen, and when that happens, you don't really blame the person who loses that much. That might not have happened. That really could be the situation. That could have played out very differently, and you would have had the superior style. You would have won there. But in terms of out-prepared, if we kind of combine it a little bit to the concept of outwork, like maybe you think to yourself, one of the mindsets that I hate, because in general it doesn't tend to go with the greatest players, is when people will say, oh, like I don't need to like prepare for a specific opponent. I'm just going to play my game, and he'll play his game, and we'll see who wins. You know, like the people who don't put their mind to the idea of preparing, like I have to look at his strengths, I have to be honest, I have to reflect, what are my strengths, how do they actually match up, and if they match up poorly, I have to be honest about that and go, listen, maybe my win conditions do not lie in this area that normally I want them to in terms of my strengths. Maybe if I play to my strength in this area, actually I'll lose the game. Maybe I have to go with something that's more chaotic, more risky for me, but that gives me a better chance to win by creating this game where we're both going to be in a world where we're not maximizing our strengths. That sort of reflection, that yourself, is the kind of preparation that would maybe give you an edge over a certain opponent, where if you've just gone with your own style and you've matched up against him and it turns out you have a terrible matchup or a specific weakness that you haven't addressed, then actually you might just get completely wrecked in that sense. So you can get outplayed, outworked, outprepared. One of the bigger areas is this fear of failure. This is why courage to me is the antidote to failure to a degree. Maybe it's better to say courage is the antidote to the fear of failure, actually. You might still fail. All these qualities I said here, you might get outplayed, you might get outworked, you might get outprepared. You can still lose. It doesn't matter what level of mindset and all the rest of it. It's not a movie. You don't always get rewarded for everything you did on that particular day, on that one time you wanted to win. Now, in general, in life in general, it's going to make you a better person, a better player, going to have more success in general. I'm sure at some point you're going to get some wins or some satisfaction from being able to face these things and prepare yourself and have a good mindset, win or lose. But it's the fear of failure that's really crippling, isn't it? Because that's the one where it won't even let you play to your level. It won't even let the hard work you did impact the game. It won't even let you work to become better, because when you lose, you'll feel so crushed and you'll question yourself and you'll wonder, should I even play the game anymore? It's the fear. That's what courage is the antidote to. Yeah, it's a better way to say it, I think. If courage is the antidote to the fear of failure. It's not to failure, but it's the fear of failure. Because we can still fail, but it's how do we face that? How do we overcome these odds? How do we endure when it's hard times, when there's difficult tasks ahead of us, when everyone else says, hey, listen, you're not supposed to win this time. How do we still endure through that? How do we have the courage to face it again and again and to come back, to say, right, I'm going to battle it again. And even if I lost last time, this time I'm going to try and I'm going to see if I can win this time. That fear is really what cripples a lot of these people I've mentioned on this list here. That's why they play differently. That's why things affect them. That's why they can beat an opponent in a semi-final. They get to the final though, and they lose to the same guy. It's very specifically that fear. And yes, sometimes it's that the opponent, like I said, can be a very brave or very brilliant player. But these people in general, if you look at a lot of these examples, they've contributed to it. They also had a slip up, or they went into it a little bit mentally weaker, or maybe they were even defeated before the game was over by the way that things went. And it's just not my day. This is so unfair. Like if I just practice one more day, like he got more work in than me because my semi-final was earlier. Whatever the excuses are, there's like a great quote that says something like, "Winners find a way, and losers find an excuse." And it's not that there's not excuses for people who lose in all scenarios. There are. But the winner, the idea is he gets to what would be the excuse for someone else, and he goes, that's not good enough, because winning's all that's my goal. So even if I have this problem, right, I've got to get past that. I've got to look for something else. I've got to win in spite of that. The loser, he loses, and he sees the excuse, and that's his lifeline. And he grabs it and he goes, right, that's why I didn't win. So, it's not my fault. Maybe I couldn't have done anything. See this excuse here. That's why I lost. So I think it's an interesting kind of, it's kind of part philosophy and it's part specific things to do with the game in terms of how you approach things and how you process what happens. And in life in general, I think it's an important concept, because just because we're not good at something or we haven't succeeded yet, we can't let the fear that we will fail next time and that things still won't go our way, which by the way, they might not. You can't be promised success, but we can't let that fear hold us back from trying and giving it our all and being willing to come back and try and improve in that particular sense. So I think these two things are quite intertwined, actually, courage and failure, because it's not just whether you fail or if you're going to fail, or if failure is even inevitable. It's how do you process it, and part of how you process it and you approach it and you prepare for it is this courage, and being able to have courage and understand why it's important and why it is the antidote to the fear of failure. And like all my videos, this one's sponsored by Vulcan, so vulcan.com, vulcun.com. And you can play Fantasy League of Legends, you can play Fantasy Counter-Strike Global Offensive. If you use the code Thorin with 3 O's, THOOORIN, then they will match your initial deposit up to $1,000. And yeah, you play those two games, CSGO, League of Legends, Fantasy Mode, if you want to play in some tournaments.